Somebody found this on my shop, went ahead, bought it. This bad boy here sold for 217 euros, including shipping. This is decent. In a week, I can safely consider to be one of the best weeks on eBay in recent time. You see, things were selling, had monitors selling. We had small form factor pieces. This I can pretty much call an ultra small form factor because there's actually the small form factor that's a little bit bigger than this one. But then we had small form factor pieces selling. We had tower pieces selling. We had, laptops, just one or two laptops, I think. We didn't have a lot of laptops selling this week because, truth be said, I also do not have a lot of laptops, listed at the moment. It's something that I actually have to look into because laptop used to be, my bread and butter for a very, very long time. And for some time now, it's kind of difficult to get this, laptops, but I'm not saying that it's impossible to get. I just need to do my homework more to see how I can actually look for them. But then, like I said, we had, SSD selling, we had, keyboard selling, we had, did I already talk about monitors? Yes, monitors. We had complete PC selling. This is without doubt one of the best weeks, I have experienced on eBay in a very, very long time. I even was surprised because I didn't know how I was able to manage all these things because at some point, I really felt like it was kind of a lot. The sales just kept coming in. As a matter of fact, this is what we actually, pray for. We hope that whenever we have items listed, these items we sell, because if they do not sell, then it's also not good enough. Then it just puts you on an unnecessary stress position. You'll be wondering how you're going to meet your weekly or your monthly target in terms of sales. But when I started selling a long time ago, I really was stressed about these things. I was stressed by the fact that things were not selling. And whenever things were not selling, it was already, a reason for me to be stressed because the expenses, for one reason or the other, it just kept mounting. And this is exactly how it is. And it's not different for you if you are also a reseller that sells a lot of stuff on the internet. If you depend on this reselling business to actually meet your needs, yes, one way or the other. I'm not talking about stress like you being unable to sleep, but your mind is just going to be on the fact that things are not selling, and that can be a little bit of a headache. But then when things are selling, you are kind of motivated to do more. This PC, I must say, is a very, very beautiful PC. But what I can see inside is that it's very, very dusty. This is expected because, like I always say, these are not new PCs. These are, used PCs, and sometimes they come like this. This is not the worst I've seen. I've actually seen, used PCs so dusted up, but this one actually looks also very dusty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brush and try to just, lightly, gently, brush out this dust. And thereafter, I'm going to use, the dust blower to really blow it out. The thing you do not want to do is to begin to attack these chips right here, these ICs, these capacitors and all that stuff. You don't want to start to just, try to scrub them in the bit to clean them. And as a matter of fact, a PC like this having a little bit of dust inside is also not an abnormal thing to see, because the people that are going to receive these PCs, they pretty much understand that, look, this is a machine that keeps working, tirelessly. Of course, I'm going to remove all these ones. These are plastic parts. With my little rag, I can actually go ahead to make sure that this is properly cleaned. Definitely, I'm going to be doing that now. You see, this is a repeat buyer that came for this PC. See, if I had done a bad job previously, if the PC I sold earlier on didn't meet the buyer's expectation, definitely this buyer would not have come back to my shop, to shop again. I'm so happy because when somebody comes back to your shop to shop for something, it's the best confirmation that you need that you have actually satisfied the buyer. Hopefully, this PC also meets the buyer's need. There was just a little bit of a technical, situation. The PC I actually listed, the pictures actually used for this PC, I did select the wrong, pictures. On the picture I used, they were actually a microphone jack and as well as a headphone jack. But this PC, given that is the ultra small form factor, even though it's written behind it that is the small form factor, but the only way I can actually distinguish them, because I don't know if I can just bring the small form factor and show you. I have the other, a little bit bigger version. I also need to be sure that that's actually, being called a small form factor or just a desktop. I'm not so sure at this point, but that I can actually clarify and just leave, a link in the description for you to actually take a look at the difference. So I was saying that on the picture on the offer, we had a microphone jack, as well as a headphone jack, because apparently on the picture, you really cannot distinguish, the size of these pieces. But right here, this is exactly what the buyer is going to be, getting. But every other thing in terms of the port, in terms of the processor that the PC has, in terms of the, the possibilities to upgrade it with a SATA SSD or an NVMe SSD or even a HDD, like you can see here, everything is there. So I really want to think that this shouldn't be a problem for whoever is buying it. But what I always tell you guys on this channel is that, look, you have to try your best to make sure that the items you are sending out to people is exactly the same thing that they have actually seen on your listing and they bought, because then there's every possibility for someone to complain that the item you sent over is not as described. But from my experience selling these hardwares, people are pretty much flexible. If this was a shoe, then it's a kind of a different thing, because if you have told somebody that you are sending a shoe over in size in color brown, and then you end up sending a shoe that is in the color black, it might just be, a good reason for somebody to say that the item is not as described. But this PC, as it were, has everything that has been put in the offer. You have 4 RAM slots, like you can see there. You have the possibility to slot in a low profile graphic card right there. And every other thing is pretty much the same. It's the same company. The PC is in the best condition. Forget about the fact that it's still looking dusted up right now, but I'm going to be making sure that this is going to be, properly clean, that when the buyer receives it, there would just be absolutely no reason under the sun for the buyer to want to complain. Guys, this is what we'll talk about when we're talking about flipping pieces for profit. Business has been very, very good. I was always of the opinion that, look, in summer, things tends to slow down. Yes, it's not like my opinion. This is actually a known fact that in summer, things tends to slow down. But a few weeks ago, I was taking a look at my promoted listing strategies, my what you call it, my advertising strategies on eBay. And I kind of realized that, me pushing these items with the highest percent of promoted listing was totally keeping me out of business, because then my items were coming out even much more expensive than what the competitor would naturally sell. And I felt like this is just, bad business. It's always best for people can actually, get items for cheap, not like they're going to be buying the same item from you because you are trying to use 20% of promoted listing, and then your item becomes too expensive. They buy it, and at the end of the day, it's just a mess. So I went ahead, relisted a lot of my items, changed the pricing strategy just to ensure that, look, when people eventually land in my shop, then they are sure that they are getting a PC at a very, very competitive price. I'm not going to say that this is exactly what happened. It's also possible that right now, this week, a competitor doesn't have so much product available, and because of that, naturally, people just, look at the next available option to buy their stuff. But this week has been super profitable. Hopefully, this momentum, we're going to keep it, for next week. And definitely, we're going to be doing what we know, how to do best, which is flipping pieces for profit. And if this is something that interests you, I want to encourage you, please go ahead and be subscribed to the channel. Take a look at the previous videos. Definitely, there's a lot to learn around, setting up these pieces, a lot of tips, surrounding, packing these pieces, dealing with customers' complaints. There are just a lot of things to learn. And if you go back to these old videos, you will be doing yourself a lot of good, and learning a lot from these videos. So please go ahead and be subscribed. Click on the like button. Until I see you again in the next video. Peace out.